Hi everyone, my name is Jalissa Zayas and I will be talking to you all today about the misattribution of memory. So imagine you're in a really tough biology class and you're taking your final exam. It was brought to your professor's attention that someone in your lab table was cheating, so he asks you who it was and you point to Jack, but in reality it was Sue. It just so happened that when Sue was looking over at Megan's test, Jack happened to ask for an eraser at the same time. So the last thing you remembered was Jack asking for an eraser and you automatically thought it was him. That is called the misattribution of memory, where you believe you saw or heard something, but in reality you didn't. You just confused it with something else. Misattribution of memory has been studied by psychologists for many years. In fact, it is one of the 7 sins of memory created by Harvard psychologist Daniel Skader. Skader's book, The 7 Sins of Memory, basically summarizes the 7 ways in which human memory can fail. And despite the problems that these problems can cause, there are side effects of positive features of memory. So it is a benefit if you are aware with the misattribution of memory because it can get you in a lot of trouble. And being aware of it and its effects can save you from having altercations in the future. Imagine you mixing up a certain situation and then you can cause... I'm not going to give that away. I'm going to explain that later. But it can cause something really bad for either yourself or for the other person. And as I mentioned before, it can be harmful in many ways, especially legal ones. And although there is not much control over your memory and what you can remember and what you don't remember, being aware about it can at least kind of help you or help someone else as well. So I introduced the idea of misattribution of memory, but what is it exactly? So the misattribution of memory is when you have the ability to remember information correctly, but you end up getting things confused. So you end up being wrong about the source of information or anything relating to that situation. So it could be mixing up the source of the information, mixing up what exactly happened, what exactly was said, what exactly did you see, things like that. As I mentioned prior, Daniel Skader has written the book, The 7 Sins of Memory, How the Mind Forgets and Remembers. And the sin of misattribution involves assigning a memory to the wrong source. It takes a correct collection of information and links it to an incorrect recollection of the source of that information. And I read a little snippet of the book because I obviously didn't buy it in its entirety, but I read a couple pages relating to misattribution of memory. And I read that misattribution of memory can just be the littlest of things. It can mean switching up minor details or just confusing one situation with another, kind of like a deja vu kind of ordeal. You thought this happened or something similar happened to you before, so you use whatever happened in that previous situation into this new one. So that's kind of what misattribution of memory is, just confusing certain points or just getting your thoughts confused. So misattribution of memory pretty much occurs when people incorrectly believe that an element is new when in reality it's just perceptually or conceptually similar to another element they had previously encountered. And that exact excerpt is in his book. And that's what I was trying to get at in my previous example of using your deja vu or using a scenario that happened to you in your past life or in the past. And it's something similar is happening now, so you're using whatever happened in the past and you're relating it to now. And that's something that a lot of people do. And it's common. It's a common thing. It's something that you don't have control over. It's just what you remember or what the last thing you remembered was. And it depends a lot on the attitudes of the people and the way they perceive certain things. I know oftentimes people hear what they want to hear or remember things that were beneficial to them or what was important to them. Selective hearing. They only want to hear what they want to hear. So now that we understand what misattribution of theory is, let's discuss how it can be very, very harmful. Like I said, misattribution of memory is where you confuse certain situations, and many times misattribution of memory gets brought up in legal situations. For instance, take into consideration an eyewitness testimony. It can be harmful here because people have a memory related to a crime that they might misattribute it. So they might recognize a face and they might misattribute that to being the perpetrator of a crime, when in fact it's just the face of an innocent bystander. It's just the last thing you saw, the things that you remember. And it's sad because a lot of innocent people get in trouble because of misattribution, because people can't remember. It's so common that when they're going through legal cases, that misattribution gets taken into consideration, because there have been many times where innocent people just go to jail because the person forgets or they just can't remember. But there's not much that you can do. It's just, if you need something at the spot, the only thing you have are the bystanders, the people that were around, the witnesses, and you have to go kind of based off like what they say. There was an article in Psychology Today where misattributions can have disastrous consequences, but most are not so dramatic in everyday circumstances. So, for example, like, we're going to relate it back to Dr. Dewberry's like example of like the office situation. So like there's Megan and Jack, and we're going to include Sue in this one. So Megan, Jack, and Sue, and Megan saw Jack and Sue in the printer station, and she saw them like messing with the paper or whatever. And then next week, their boss says, oh, well, there's printer paper missing from the printer station. Like, who was it? And Megan says, oh, well, I don't know, Jack and Sue were there, but it was Jack who took it. But in reality, it was Sue. But it just so happened that since Jack was there, and since Jack was just probably like a prominent figure that she remembered, she thought it was Jack. And Jack gets fired because he stole printer paper. But that's just an example of like how it can stir up drama, or like how it can stir confusion, because it's like, well, yeah, I was there, but it wasn't me. That kind of thing. And it's just, how do I put it in other words? Like, misattribution of memory is just something that you cannot control, like I said previously. And yeah, people just basically they just get things confused when they just get little minor details confused. But in a lot of cases, like, it is really serious. And unfortunately, because of misattribution, a lot of people get in trouble when they didn't deserve to be in trouble. But now that we have defined the misattribution of memory and how harmful it could be, we now know how, like, steering away from how negative misattribution memory may be, everyone has to remember that they are human first. And mistakes happen, and misattribution of memory is something that you can't control no matter how hard you try. Having memory and, like, having the ability to remember certain details is a beautiful thing, because, you know, sometimes people who have Alzheimer's, like, they unfortunately can't remember certain things. So, like, having the ability to, like, remember certain things and to remember, like, certain situations is beautiful. But it gets confused and it gets, like, mistaken sometimes, and that's just something that is out of everyone's control. But thank you for listening to my speech about the misattribution of memory, and I hope it was really helpful. Thank you.